Good morning. Anya? She's going to see. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this open table. Today, our guest is Fiete Stolte, but we have also our curator, Christine Marcel, here. And talking about, first of all, the Tavola Aperta, it is a project conceived by Christine. It is an occasion to go a little bit deeper into the artist practice and in the artwork exhibited here at the Biennale. So don't be shy, do your question, and of course it is a lunch, and so don't be shy even to eat something while listening to our artist. I would like to give the word first to Christine, that maybe can add something about the open table and about her choice of Fiete. And then, of course, Fiete will introduce the artwork he's exhibiting here. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Actually, I met Fiete, I think, almost 10 years ago, or actually his work in Berlin, whilst we were researching for the show based in Berlin. Mm-hmm. And I remember his work strongly because he was very interested in some issues that I'm also interested in, dealing with time. This idea of having a week of 8 days, for example. These cultures molding his body, sleeping on the floor. All this was still in my memory when I began to think about the Biennale. And as my last, I would say, chapter is called the Pavilion of Time and Infinity. Immediately, I reminded of him, and we began to discuss. And looking at the space, it was very obvious that his piece that he will comment with this molded feet would really perfectly fit in this situation. So I'm very happy that we could have Fiete at the Biennale, because this work comes just after the piece about the idea of falling down, you know, the Bastianader piece, where he's hanging on the tree and falling down. I wanted to make an homage to Bastianader, who disappeared on sea. Okay. And the piece is located exactly in front of the laguna, as if actually he would have disappeared there, you know. After. And there is this loop in the film, 16 millimeters film, where he's falling down from the tree, which was a sort of obsession of him, and also with a metaphysical dimension. So that's how I constructed in my mind the path of the last part of the exhibition.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me to the whole show and here to this Tavola Aperta. And I mean, we will get into conversation about several topics, but this as a starting point. When I discussed with my wife, who I want to introduce in the beginning, it's Julia Stolte. She helps me, in like all the things that I'm doing, and especially here in the biennial, the whole thing. And when we talking about the show and how we've seen it, we always thought that the Giardini del Vergine, there it's really nicely connected, the works from one to the other, with the Bastianader, with the jumping of from the tree. The other piece, I don't know the artist's name.
Just after you, I think it's you have Vadim Fishkin.
Yeah, also
these doors.
Pieces, the doors.
And Sebastian Diaz Morales. So it was the idea of continuing this sort of meditation about presence, absence, and even death, infinity. With the pieces of Sebastian Morales, you have this endless loop also of a woman going through a landscape and opening doors that lead to nowhere, actually. And with Vadim Fishkin, you have this opening door on a space which sounds to be behind, but you never enter because it's a video projection. And then you finish with Attila Chorgo with this loop, this infinity that is reconstructed with very low-tech means. And this was the idea of the sort of finishing with a sort of meditative atmosphere without conclusion, but leading to a dimension that is both metaphysical and also linked to scientific issues about cosmology research, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it gives a lot of space or leaves a lot of space to imagination, which is, for me, in my practice or in general, I think the most important thing in art, to just have, like, to present something visually and then leave the space for imagination. So in this part, I think all the works, they leave the space very much because it's low-tech, like you say, also my piece, very low-tech, like very silent, you could also say, to have the given space and then just to give an idea to those who don't know the work. It's called Printing My Steps, and it's just two footprints, actually, like three-dimensional footprints made or worked in copper that are inserted into the floor. So what you find is just the given floor and then two imprints that are going like a three-dimensional negative space into the floor. So the room is actually empty and you just have these traces from a moment when someone could have been there, just this one moment taken out of the passing of time.
But how did you actually get interested in those issues? Because I remember you went to Weissensee school in Berlin, so which was a school that was more linked to also design and fashion, art all together, so not very much with these conceptual and more, I would say, scientific concerns. So how did you get into this particular interest?
I think in general, art schools are just a place to develop your own ideas and your interests.
No, but like I mean, it was very special in the context of the Berlin scene at this moment, which.
I mean, I cannot explain it by myself. Probably this needs a view from the outside, like this could have happened, but I can say for my own approach to art that possibly, or it's quite likely that the whole use and everything in Berlin is an important, has an impact to my work because I mean, I was born in Berlin, and it was a very special place at that time, like an island, like very centered in Europe, and but an island nevertheless, surrounded by another country. So a very strange situation actually. And I mean, I was 10 when the wall fell down, so I realized it a little bit. I couldn't get the whole point, but it was there that it changed. And even before, there are these impressions and memories that some trains, the S-Bahn, the metro, would go through stations where it wouldn't stop, and it was in the other country. So you would drive through another country, look through the windows, and it wouldn't stop, like a ghost train, and all these things. I mean, I was quite small, like I said, but it makes something with you, and I think this probably is even more important for the former work, actually. These very basic impressions
of division. And
of division, of being isolated, but in a positive sense. I mean, it was just interesting to me to be there at home and in your country, and then it's surrounded by something else, but it feels comfortable. I mean, in West Berlin, it was all nice and easy, but yeah, it's very particular. You would not find in very many places. And then the art school, I mean, yeah,
it's not so much about the art school itself, but how, I mean, for you, led you to this subject. So must be more something very personal, as you explained, which is somehow a mix of conceptual issues, but also something that is a dialogue between materiality and immateriality, because there are pieces actually like sculptures or imprints.
Yeah, actually, when I was still in art school, I was just making my mind up how to practice art without trying all the materials. It was more about thinking and posing questions to myself, like what can I do? And I came actually to the point where I thought, like this temporal parameters, that's something that's really interesting to me. It's immaterial, and so what I did in the beginning of my career, or even before during art school, was to do a kind of modeling with that, to change actually the time for myself, which meant in a concrete way that I just divided the week into 8 days, into 8 shorter days, so that I could live this time structure in the given surrounding, art school and everything in the city, but having my own time structure, which meant that it was a disconnection from sunlight, or from the light in general. And so in this beginning, it was really immaterial. And it was very special and interesting to me to have this, it wasn't a piece, but this topic, and to just talk about it or present the work without showing anything. Just stand there and tell the people what I'm working on. And people, they were really, they could enter this world and these pieces without having any visual images, nothing, just the imagination. And that was very important actually in the beginning, to tell them stories without, being a writer or something, just tell them the ideas. And since they were really strong in a way that they were like, I don't know if they have the right words, but they were really it was a whole word to enter, not just an idea, but a whole frame of thinking, and like with the sun inside, and with the history of scientific questions, or even religious, because having an 8th day, like, posed the question what was done on the 8th day, and different things.
But even in the artist practice video, you send us a video with, I think, recorded outside your studio, and we sent the video to our guest, the one that booked the seats, to have a first introduction of your work. And the artist practice video was one of the section, let's say, of the biennial this year. So it is a closer look to your studio and this particular way of working that you have, your practice that you have. Can you maybe explain a little bit the video to do one connection with the connection of the works that you did?
The video just features me being inside and outside the studio, which is a building on the ground floor within a park, actually, in Berlin. So it's not a typical studio building for Berlin. It's in that way very much connected to my practice, because it's in Berlin, it's even in the center, you could say, but it's in the green, very remote place. So what I'm doing there is walking around and just switching lights on and off. So this is again just about, not really about the perspective, but being seen, not being seen, or be able to see myself, or be in the completely dark. So it's just, it's very similar to the topic of time, because it's invisible, and just like by switching something on and off, it creates something which is of no material actually. And since the studio as a place is very much connected to the work, it was for me a good way to give a portrait, and also with the idea that, yeah, for the artist, I mean, what is like the question of work? What is work? Is it like having a hammer in the hand, or a brush and painting stuff, or just sitting there or walking around and or thinking? It can be everything, so much different things.
But what happened exactly in your life when you decided to live 20 with a day of 21 hours? So you were not sleeping, I would say, at the same time than the others. You were always going more and more in a different rhythms through the week with the social life. So how did you deal with that?
The impact actually was that during this or during 1 week, the shift was increasingly big to me. It meant that my time was going away from the time of the surrounding. 3 days for every day, 3 hours for every day. But in the end of the week, it came closer again to start off with the same time every week, with the first day. And yeah, of course, it was a physical, it had a physical impact, but the most important thing to me was the idea that it's something really invisible. It's a latent thing that you cannot see or really get until you tell something about it, or show something about it. For people that saw me at that time, for them it was really, like invisible. Not just invisible, it was not even existent. It was just that there was a guy, and when I told them that for me it was, for instance, like close to midnight, and for them it was just about to have breakfast, then they were just, oh, but why? How can it be? And then it was a conversation, and it came to light from nothing actually. And there were a lot of situations, of course, going to the studio and then being there, the first one there, and the guys there couldn't like guess how I could manage to be there that early, and said like, what's happening? And fell out of bed, and I told them, it's already afternoon, what are you talking about? And these kind of situations. And they were like, hey, what is he like talking about? And then the other ones that knew my work, they were like, okay, sorry, it's clear that it's you or it's the work. But others really were confused, and there were a lot of these situations. I mean, walking around in the city just after a breakfast and then seeing nobody, like walking through a city that is just empty and calm and dark, it's very special. And then, yeah.
But was it to question the fact that time is, in this case, a social decision to, in general, meet? And actually, it was the clock was also invented for this reason, that if you want to meet precisely at a certain time, especially when you do business and need to be efficient. So there is all this social and economical dimension of time. Were you interested in questioning this, or?
Yeah, of course, I was interested in that, and also, yeah, it's a commentary on that, on this
convention.
of this convention, and how it became more and more important in our everyday lives. I mean, like just 100 years ago or two, I mean, before the industrialization, of course, it wasn't that strict. I mean, the time, the work was different, but then with industrialization and the need to be there, to go to a place, to work in the factory and everything like this, it changed a lot, of course, like habits and this time structure. For instance, when we just had this talk with a journalist in Germany last week, and he came with the information. He just had read the book about like the change of this topic of sleep and everything, and it's clear. But he told us again that before it wasn't normal that people would sleep the whole night through and then work the whole day and fall to bed in the evening like this, but have smaller periods of work and be awake in the night, like sitting together on the fire, and like it's what really different. And then with the needs of work to be like there at the right time, and then work until it's dark or something, and then like go to sleep. But yeah, for me it was also this exaggeration of these needs.
The rules.
Just, the rules to say, like, because it means an exaggeration to have not just 7 days to work or whatever, but 8 days. That means like all the time and even more. So it's an exaggeration, but at the same time, it's also playing a trick on this idea of economy, because you're out, or I was out, just not how to say, compatible to the world, because I was completely out. I couldn't function in these ways. I mean, I could go somewhere and do the same things on a completely same day of the time of the day, but it didn't really function.
And
So
would you call it a performance strictly, or because the status also of the work is very interesting
it's
in terms
unclear,
of
the status. I wouldn't call it a performance, but of course it had a performative character in some ways.
Deeply performative.
Yeah, really, but I never called it a performance.
Yeah.
It has that character, but also others. I mean, you couldn't put it into this corset of being a performance or being other things, because when I worked on that, there were just pieces coming out of this time structure that would more or less communicate this idea that people could understand, because for me art is communication, and when I put something out, it could be like a series of Polaroids that were showing just the change of the light, for instance. Then it was an idea to give people the chance to go into it and have a look, and then make their own ideas about it. So
but you did even a 8-day week clock that is
Yeah,
still
yeah, yeah.
available online, that can be, and it leads to a calendar, a specific calendar. So you try to share even in this way your
Yeah.
week,
Yeah, because for people, I found out that it's very interesting to enter these ideas or this world, to come in and then think about it, but also, yeah, with this inside view. And yeah, a lot of pieces were giving just hints how you could see it. I mean, with the sun and also darkness and light, because it gave the chance to me to have a view from the outside. That was the main thing that I found out, that I could, for instance, have a look on the day from the perspective of night, but from this isolated position, yeah, from where it was just very a remote place, not like the normal night, to have it very clear or disconnected from all the other questions around, or yeah, that's something.
Was it
a
also a
good
comment
idea.
about the scientific, discoveries of the last century about relativity of time, the fact that time doesn't pass the same way if you're at one point or the other, even if you're on a mountain or...
I did not really want to prove it,
Not
and I
proof,
don't.
but
Yeah, like I don't
comment.
like, get all these ideas really, because they are so abstract with the passing of time. Yeah, even for me, that I was really reading a lot about this. It's so abstract, but of course, it's inside this possibility of changing the perspective, which changes a lot. For instance, like you said, a very early and very important work of mine.
You can talk.
This is the piece called 8 Sunrises and 8 Sunsets, which is actually a series of Polaroids. It's 8 Polaroids of sunrises and 8 Polaroids of sunsets. And they were taken, these Polaroids, during one journey around the world. What I did was to leave Berlin on Monday, heading east by plane, and with several stops over Hong Kong, Sydney, Honolulu, LA, and New York. I made the journey around the world and take Polaroids, these Polaroids of the sun rising and setting in the evening. And when I came back on Sunday to Berlin, I had the series of 8 sunrises and 8 sunsets. So this was actually like a visual proof, not really scientific, but I mean, people couldn't say it's not true that the week has 8 days. I mean, that was the visual proof.
Yes, of course. Can you use the microphone? Maybe no. Quello era meglio.
Good idea.
Okay.
Vielleicht ein bisschen Käse.
It works.
It's okay. Yeah. I don't know if it gives you a chance to eat something as well.
Yeah, thank you.
I have to formulate my question.
Thank you.
I can see a lot the link between creating a different time structure and isolation. I'm thinking people who work night shifts are very isolated socially from the rest of us. You know, they don't go out in the evenings to bars and socialize or go to art events or the cinema because they're having to go to work when we're beginning to relax. So there's that isolation. And you mentioned being born, you know, in a country that is isolated. I'm thinking Venice has historically been quite isolated from Italy. I'm from England, Britain, which is in the process of isolating itself now. It's quite a big theme. I read somewhere, and the Venetians here can put me right, that the Venetians used to have their own time calendar, sort of weekly, that started in the evening, that the new day started in the evening. Have I misread that, maybe? I just don't know if someone... No one else has heard of that. I've misread that somewhere. But just this sort of bringing the theme back to sort of isolation again, and sort of creating this. I mean, you're sort of on the one hand wanting to bring people into this idea, but I'm wondering sort of how much, you know, as an artist wanting to publicize, or how much you want to just go into that isolated space.
Yeah.
Is that might be the question?
Yeah. I think for me this isolation is really meant to be a possibility to have a clear view, because if you have a position that is kind of isolated, then you don't have not like all the information, all the like sounds around you, and all the like fast changing information. So this is what I mean with the isolation. Like I said, for instance, with the studio, which has this qualities that I just like for working or for thinking. For instance, as you mentioned, these other islands or Venice, I see what you mean. For instance, some years ago, I spent some months in Iceland, and for me, it's very, very strongly connected to this idea, like the studio, because it's inside of Europe, but then on the other hand, it's really outside. It's really in the nothing, not like Great Britain, which is really close and in the very center. Iceland belongs to Europe, but is like somewhere that. In the very beginning, that's the thing that came to my mind because of the isolation in the literature, in Orwell's well-known book. There was this one, I think he was philosopher or I don't know, but he was asking too much questions, and he was sent to Iceland to be like on the outpost and be away to don't like. Be able to put pose all these questions that are they did not want to be heard. So these qualities are really, I mean, they could have a negative impact, like isolation. Really, it could be a bad thing. But I mean, to have a position that is still inside, but on a like an outpost where you can have a clear look, and make your own ideas that are could be new, like this idea of the time structure. It's not like something really scientific. It's very basic. It's just this small shift with a great impact, and probably there is already the studio inside, or it came out of this space. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and not just to eat, but to enter into what I think is the core of all creative arts, and that is the dialogue. So these are a couple of questions without easy answers. So if I've understood part of your work, it has to do with isolation, and it has to do with a sensitivity that you can experience by perceiving time differently. And in many ways, it seems that a flight to Calcutta and stepping off the airplane will give you this experience. It puts everything in contradiction to what you have experienced the month or the years before. And you're listening to the song of the circadian rhythm and not to the sunlight over or the traffic on the street. So I'm not quite sure, I think I am sure, but not quite sure, that what you're doing is giving people an opportunity under the rubric of art to think about this without having to go to India and step off the airplane. The second question is, as you have an obvious attraction to the reduction of material, you arrive at a point which seems to me what you have arrived at in many ways. It's not as loud as that, but it's just about as abstract, where it is a concept. And that leads to the second question. Where do you think you will be in your work in 20 years from now, since you've arrived at a vacuum? Okay, vacuum.
Yeah. Maybe first to the second question. It's interesting, but of course I cannot tell. But since I came from like having nothing in my hands, in the beginning, like I told you, I was just telling ideas or what I build up just by like changing a little bit the passing of time or the sections. Probably I will go back there, but I cannot tell you, because it's true that a lot of pieces by myself and very reduced to the minimum of material. Just one material that has some traces or is worked in a way to transport an idea, and probably it will go back to the idea that it's just very concentrated, like an essence. For instance, a newer work of mine is also in this way very dense or concentrated. It is a work, a digital clock that we know with the 7-segment display, where you have like just the time. It's known, like, or well known since the 60s or 70s, these displays. And what I did with this piece called Inverted Clock is to change on and off. So the time is presented by the segments that you won't need for a number. So what you see is actually this display showing strange lines, and you must think actually it's broken in some way. But if you have the title and go inside, you just have to change like black to white and on to off, like the opposite, and then you can read the single numbers and you get the time. It's a clock that just tells you the time. And this one is really very much reduced to the idea of opposites, which came from my work actually, like night and day, presence and absence, visibility and invisibility. So this is very much reduced, and it's just the idea of flipping these two opposites around. And then for me it's interesting that it's very much about the spectator who needs to go inside himself, who just gets an idea over the title and then can decide himself whether to go inside to make this work happen or not. It takes some time. It's not too easy to consume, not by the first view. It takes some seconds to just read it like a language, and that's interesting to me, really, to give something that can be followed by the spectator. And by that, I don't remember the first question exactly, but Probably it's connected to this one.
Thank you. The thought that occurred to me while you were talking is that it recurs and it recurs again that you want to experience as well as you want other people to experience being outside. And so one version of being outside is to go into isolation. I'm taking advantage because I'm adding to the first question. Why can you not take the opposite position in the sense, instead of isolation, take involvement, and you can attain the isolation within the same dynamic of involvement, Socratic method. Putting questions to people puts you outside, and you can do that day and night and stay outside that way and get people to be involved until they understand that you actually learn more answers through proper questions than you do the other way. So,
I don't know if I really get the very center of your question, but for me it's very much about the precision of doing something. I mean, everyone could have the experience of going to strange places, especially nowadays. I mean, everyone does, but for me, it was just a starting point, like my work engagement and these questions that are interesting to me, and then to give people the opportunity to follow me is just my way of working. I mean, of course, I could just pose these questions or like different questions, or write stories about like fictional stories about what could happen in other places. But for me, it was it felt right to just have an experience and have ideas that everyone can rethink or enter, but also with a different way, actually, because for one person it's about economics and how it perverted in some way, since like 150 years. For the other one, it's a philosophic question, like how could it be that someone is like takes this like for himself this right to change the time. For the other one, it's religious, and even is maybe angry that I'm attacking Christian beliefs. And so for everyone it could be different, and this is an important point to me.
Yes, of course.
Hello. I'm curious, what's your relationship to time in your work now?
I just wanted to, as my wife asked me to do it, it was a good idea to tell something about a very recent work, which is in an exhibition in Berlin just now. It is a series of large-scale Polaroids, and showing actually me or my hands handling an hourglass with sand inside. but it's a special one that I produced in Berlin, or some, I don't know this how this job is called, that is also done in Murano, like
Glass blowing.
yeah, glass blowing, yeah. And there is this guy in Berlin that did this hourglass for me, and I asked him to open it, to cut it on both ends, to just open it. So what is to be seen on the Polaroids is the glass and my two hands, where I always refill the glass. I mean, it's a strong symbol. It's a vanitas symbol of time passing, or death, or the try to fix something that cannot be fixed, life. And I'm always refilling it, and so it's leaving the hourglass on the bottom. You don't see where it's going. On other Polaroid, it's making a small hill in my hand. In another one, the hourglass is horizontal, and in another one, it's filled, like both parts of the hourglass are just full, and in another one, it's very different aspects of the use of this very strong symbol. So this is a recent piece where I also I'm trying to find an image for the passing of time, and try to visualize this topic that is very ephemeral. Actually, it's hard to touch. Actually, yeah.
So one of the things that I think about when you mention time is nostalgia and melancholy. So I was wondering, kind of, where's that in your work? And the other thing that I've been questioning or thinking about is the materiality and objectivity of art, and looking around the Biennale and seeing how much physical material is used. And then you say about traveling east and taking planes, and I'm thinking about like the environmental cost, and is that a move towards digital, and is that an element of like kind of nostalgia that, you know, bearing in mind like climate change and stuff, and what's your view on the artist in relationship to that as well? So a few questions.
Yeah, the last one, of course, nowadays you have to think about it, but actually when I did this piece, I strongly felt that I really have to do it. So I did it, and and I'm...
It's not a criticism, it's just...
I think of it, but I think I would have done it all again, because I mean, sometimes the idea it's stronger than other hesitations. I don't know, just very simple. You asked about the melancholy in general, or some special aspect?
Within your work and nostalgia. So even Polaroids is kind of looking
Yeah,
at the glass. It's a yearning for something other, and how it sits, and how the digital sits completely opposite to a traditional method such as glass blowing. And so Polaroid is kind of a modern nostalgia.
I can tell you something about this, because I used Polaroid for the first time when I did this journey, because I was searching for something, for a technique to catch the light on the site, to really catch it. And for me, it's not so much about nostalgia, the Polaroid thing, but to have objects. I mean, for me, it's more an object, like a nostalgic image, because the light even touches the photographic paper on site. So the light is entering the machine, it's touching the paper, it's developed, and then it's there. And you avoid questions like the addition, the size, the yeah, the post-production, like editing stuff, because that's not interesting to me. For me, it's an interesting thing that it's really, yeah, it's produced on site. It was touched by the light.
An imprint also.
Yeah,
again.
it's like an imprint. Yeah, that's the right term for it. Like with the materials here, with the copper imprints that are going into the floor, it's an imprint on the light, like a fingerprint. It was touched. So that's when I used it at the first time, and it felt really right to me to have to produce, like it's small. It's kind of, yeah, it's a very direct way for me. It's not the way to have like an Umweg, like a long way to go to something that is nice. But for me, it's a direct way to go there, to have the image, to be to be able to present present something that was produced there. And of course, like melancholy is something that, yeah, can be seen inside. It's an yeah, it always was a topic in arts. It's an interesting thing because from the, yeah, in the lonely nights or something, I mean, ideas must rise from something in some moments, and that's also the idea of isolation. I mean, but seen in a positive way. Of course, melancholy is inside, and nostalgia, yeah, maybe even nostalgia, but for me, melancholy is more important, I think. With the hourglass, that was, yeah, the idea to take a very strong symbol that is well known and work with it. Also, play around with it and overcome it, or like being, yeah, in a kind of funny way stronger than this symbol, you know, and yeah, play a trick on it. So,
and could we say that your work, your practice actually is about leaving traces somehow?
yeah, I think it's very much about leaving traces. This can be found in very different works with different material. Like, yeah, in the photographic works, like we were talking about it with the Polaroid, that it's traces given by light, and then here in the piece Printing My Steps is a trace of someone or me being there, and give the imagination that at one moment I must have been there without being there at the moment. And also in other works, it can be imprints or also, yeah, other works that are on the wall. Yeah, of course. Did you tell about the work that were like based in Berlin? I don't think so, because that was when
the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did the beginning of this conversation. Yeah. But maybe you can explain how.
Yeah, this was.
It's an imprint of your body sleeping.
Yeah, it's a cast bronze that has just the imprint of my body during one night's sleep. So it's just traces that you cannot like understand in the first moment, because it's just like smaller and wider imprints on a format that is 2 meters by 1 meter. So it has the size of a body or mattress, and of course it is the cast bronze of a mattress. And what I did is just sleeping on a surface that keeps the traces inside, and I translated it to bronze, to a material that has the idea of lasting forever and keeping the traces. So this one is put into the floor as the way of presenting it, and yeah, it gives the idea of traces without being there at the place myself anymore. It's yeah, being present while being absent.
So it's more dealing about impermanence at the end.
Yes, I mean, this is like the temporal issues.
Not so much time, but impermanence and sort of process of destruction of the matter or transformation, let's say, that you try to grasp and, you know,
Yeah,
stop at some moments.
I can just see it in a temporary way, to take something out of the process, out of the passing, in both ways.
I think we talked a lot about different approaches of Fiete, and I'm very much in touch with all of his works, also in an archive.
Because you take care of the archives.
Yeah. And I think what I can tell also as a person being very approached to him and his work is it's like a Sisyphus process. It's a very sensitive approach, and sometimes he succeeds, and sometimes he just has to accept that life has an end and time has an end for some moments, and he's in a very sensitive way trying to catch these moments and with different kinds of materials. And sometimes it's really in an artifact way. You really have something in your hand, and sometimes it maybe stays in this performative way. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's true. Sometimes it's the work and yeah. And in the end, it's just something that wouldn't lead to a proper piece, but it's just...
You're not exacting the form, yeah? You're always doing a little revolution against it and trying to find a new perspective to break the form.
Yeah.
So I had a question about how you kind of come to materials, because you're using a lot of different things, a lot of different processes. Like you've used neon, and that's kind of very different than using casting and things like that. And I'm just wondering, like, when you're coming to these ideas, when do you decide to add in the material? Like, are you thinking like oh, I saw neon and I'm very interested in that material, and then add it into the idea, or are you coming to the idea first and then thinking of what material to use into it?
Of course, the material is decided in the very end of the process. I mean, it's starting by the idea, which is not to be very precise in the beginning, but then in the process it's formed, and then in the end it's just the search of the material, or in the end it's clear, it asks for some certain material. I mean, for me the material is very important, but of course to be decided in the end. For instance, when it comes to neon, it's of course about the visuality, that it's like really kind of loud, kind of very visible, and then in some pieces I of course try to break this. That's what you said, to just use it in another way, that for instance it's the other way around, that it's it shines, but then it's not the for instance the letters are shining, but the parts in between two letters, so that it's about the visuality, and but at the same time you cannot read it because it's hidden under this own technique. It's reversed, like with the inverted clock, that it's used in a way that's really it's contrasting its own purpose.
It's interesting with the piece here in Venice with these molded feet. that actually it's a very fixed form. To react to what you said, this sort of battle with the form to reflect this paradoxical moment of appearance, disappearance. But at the same time, it gives a feeling of immateriality. So I think it's very achieved in your practice, because you could in this piece put the two aspects of your research. And I'm convinced that for you this is actually the point, to reach the exact balance between absence and presence into the piece. Like you said, neon might be over visible. So how to have an incarnation of something without being too present somehow.
It's evoking a presence with the absence of the
yeah,
artist
it's very difficult to describe, because we have these words, presence, absence, but it's more. It creates a space, as you said, of imagination, which again is not the proper term.
I think
it opens a space where somehow you feel you can fly, I would say.
I think the imagination is an important part, because aspect of it, because it needs to have like precise, visual. Like it must be enough, but not too much to be seen. Then, for me, or I think it's the best way to start the imagination of someone else, because if it's all there and overwhelming, then you cannot have your own images. It's like literature. Then you don't need very much to create something that is really present. And that's why I think it's what you said, like it's something there, the material, but it's very few. It's reduced. It's that's an important way when thing or question when working, when doing a new piece. What we are talking a lot, my wife and me, when I have an idea, then in the end it's about like how to transport this idea, how to communicate it visually. Then it's coming to the point of not just the material, but also what needs to be said, what needs to be shown, and what needs to be hidden, to be continued by someone else, to be
I wish to add something. I think it's sometimes your work is very much about being absent and what is present then, but sometimes I had the feeling now that we're talking about a very conceptual work, but the way I feel about your work is sometimes it's very intuitive and very emotional. For instance, when we're talking about the hourglass work, the first thing what came into your mind is to cut it off. It came out of his stomach very, very fast. And I think this is something you cannot run away from. It's this is the opposite of being absent, because you're very present. It's like he's playing God in this position, because he's not accepting that time has an end. So I think it's switching from one to another. Sometimes you go back and then you come and have a very, very strong presence in
but
what
it's
you're
also
doing.
because very often when you say conceptual, it should mean that there is no sensibility, or which of course is not the case. If you think like to an artist who was so important for time issues and this dialogue with the infinity on Kanawara, And you know, his painting before his conceptual works, it was always about a body that was, you know, like aggressed and, I mean, figurative painting. And actually, if you look at his work, you can understand that it was a very strong metaphysical dialogue with the idea of death. So I think it's good that you put the conceptual input from the beginning into a larger process of life and also of feelings, sensations, unifying actually the concept with the other parts of the works. And for me also it was very important in this biennale to give the space for the artist to express all these dimensions and not make any reduction to only one aspect. So for me, theater is really going into this direction, which is very difficult, I would say, to try to find sort of balance between all these issues. And with as you say, you can fail because it's a difficult path. But it's about like sometimes you can leave traces that will finally have a value for others, and sometimes they will just vanish. You know, that's somehow the beauty of the artistic path. I mean, we can talk with other artists of the biennale with totally different practices who actually have the same struggle in a way. You know, what do you leave? What does have to stay actually as a form? If your work is based on a process. This is a whole issue that is going through the biennale actually, very strongly. And you with the piece at the end of the path of the exhibition somehow is giving this, for me, in my curatorial vision, this sort of conclusion or this balance between the opposites. And when I see your piece, actually, I have two feelings which are totally contradictory. First, when you see these feet, you feel like somebody falls in the ground, yeah? But has disappeared, so he might have flied away. But then when you see the space, which is so narrow, you can just feel that nothing has happened like what you imagined. So that's this mixed feeling, I think, is very interesting to experiment. And again, the work is about experimenting, not only, as you said, the conceptual ideas about time. So we spend a lot of times talking about conceptual things, but maybe this aspect is more important in your work, no?
Yeah, I mean, there's even some humorous aspect. I mean, this way of putting something into the given space. I mean, it means that the sculpture is negative, but it also, it finds his own, or it takes some space from the given space, yeah, it carves it out. But I mean, it's a funny thing because I mean, it's a I don't know the right word, but it's a Gleichgewicht. It's equal. Yeah, it's a balance. It's the right balance with the architectural space or the given space. I mean, it's kind of absurd, but it's strong at the same time. It's
you mean the space of this cell with the wood?
Not this, but that the sculpture is put into the floor, like melted in
the wood, the wooden floor, which is always there in this
the wooden
space,
floor that has a materiality like sand in the end, or wax or something. It's like melted in or something. It's absurd, but at the same time very strong, or could be seen as kind of hard or rude to be inside there. It's so much different ways to be seen, and yeah, I cannot guess anymore how it was, the idea was produced, but I mean, maybe it's some intuitive
Intuitive,
idea.
yeah, very
Like
intuitive.
it's not like, oh, I have to do something
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
like
sure.
this, but yeah, I mean, it's clear I have to put imprints inside, like put it out of the material that is there, because this is still a very strong and unbelievable fact that you can, like the sculpture in itself, that you take something out and the image is produced by taking something out. Like
There's the
sculpture
void.
in its purest sense, from the word, like Italian or Latin word sculpere, taking something out. And this is, in this piece, it's an image for that something is created by taking something away. For me, it's still a paradox and very unbelievable but fascinating.
Could I ask something, just following on about trace and place? So the piece was originally made for a stairway, a stairwell?
Yeah.
Okay, and you could have trusted the curator, sent the piece in the post and say, find somewhere for my footprints. And so your presence, your footprint is then is somewhere that you have never been. So my question really is about when you were choosing, the space here and where in that space. I mean, were you walking around? Were you thinking, right, it's here and here, or was it a much more collaborative?
Maybe I have to explain the process. Actually, the thing is, I knew this piece on the stairs, and thinking of Fiete in the Biennale, thinking of the spaces, I thought it needs a very special, like comment dire, un écran, special space. But of course, I discussed with him to not reproduce the initial space, because the piece is about the feet, it's not the stairs. It was made on the stairs, but I thought it could move somewhere else. Anyway, that was the case. And the piece is very different indeed, with a different context. So this context was very important for the piece here. Also, the light is very important in the piece, and the exact way you position the feet. So it seems very simple, but actually we discussed a lot. The floor, should we keep the floor? How do we put the feet? How the feet should be placed in the space when you enter, with the distance of the person entering the space, where the light should be put, what quality of the light, because all this, which is not visible also, but gives you the sensation that the artist.
So it was installed as a dialogue between you, or was it your?
Actually, we discussed a lot the piece, but of course that's his work. But I mean, I'm very concerned in the process of the making of the Biennale to discuss this with the artist, because it's not about saying, okay, you show that, thank you, we see you later. Because then the piece will not have the right, it's difficult. It's the work of an artist, but also the curator to take care of the situation when the artist arrives, that he knows what will happen. And because all these elements are very important. The light, for example, is crucial. In this case.
So could you trust a curator? So you could post the work to a curator and say, show it. Or do you have to be in the...
In some cases I could, of course, and maybe even here, but it's
you never do so. You always... You're always very close.
I like it better to have my hands on that, but I just
it was very clear that he
that
needed to come.
I could have done it in this case. But we had a look here. We came here and talked to Christine, saw the space, and
before,
like
not
last
at the
year.
last minute.
Last year in September, I think. And then we did sketches and things and thought it must be on this very position. But when we came here later,
it
or
changed.
like in the beginning of this year. We saw the space again, and then we discussed together with my wife, with Christine, with other people who just said, "Oh, it's good here." But then, in the end, of course, it's about this thin line of being being not too much visible, not too close to the door, but like into the space, into the space that people would go inside to these very tiny details, also with the light in the beginning.
And the interesting point is that actually what I very much like in this process is that you feel something and you could say not ask other people, but I prefer to ask, but in general we feel the same. That's the good thing, you know, as human beings. We very often feel the same things. And then you know that actually for most of the viewers who will come, they will feel what you felt, because there is somehow a consensus about different elements that has been studied by neurosciences about perception of forms, color, light, and so on. So that's what is beautiful, is that somehow it's not that you can control, but you can share this experience, and that's why it needs times and attention and so much emails and so much presence just for this very tiny work.
And I think when we came here in September last year, there was this wall, because it used to be
that we
for
put out
a video presentation before. So we did not have the chance to really feel the room. That's actually true. Because after 1 meter inside there was this big black wall going to the ceiling, up to the ceiling, because it was really blocked. And I think that's why we had another spot in mind, because it was just done on the paper, like it needs to be there in the middle, because we couldn't really enter the room and feel the room like it is now, like a just empty, very simple space, because it was really something different last year. If not, we would have been there immediately, because that's true. Often I experienced it like this, that if you, for instance, hang a piece on the wall or put a sculpture somewhere, that you do it, you come in and you put it somewhere, like really without having too much thoughts. You just do it in an intuitive way, and then after that you try, oh, maybe now I try to find the best place, and in the end you go back to the very first place, because that was the right one, and it's really often like this.
Yeah, it's true.
Is there time for?
Yes. The last one for you. No, for everybody.
Oh, we can continue after.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe that's even better to continue afterwards, because it has to do with this whole subject of context, which is why this is here and we see it differently, and why you are here, we see you different. Everything in art, of course, has to do with context. But for maybe that's just the introduction to a longer question, so thank you very much.
No, but you have time to tell your question. Yeah. We have time.
You have time.
Okay, we'll give it a try. Context. That's what the two of you have been talking about, finding the right context. Question one, have you ever taken a piece of your work out because it did not fit the context of the gallery or of the museum or who wanted to display it? Second question, more complicated. But it isn't all on your lap. Walter won an award for his work at the Biennale. And I was quite amazed when I first came in the month of May to realize you could not touch this work.
Which work, sorry?
By Walter.
Franz Gerhard Walter? Or
Franz Walter, yeah.
You could not touch it. You could at some moments.
Okay, this I did not know. I was only talking to the people.
Yeah.
And so there was a kind of an instinctive contradiction to what I've always understood about Walter's work.
Yeah, that's true. I can explain you.
Right, and so it's
exactly
again
why.
context. I realize there was insurance issues and there are damage issues and there are gallery issues and all these financial issues. But the soul of that guy's work was actually to have physical contact. And he apparently agreed to it. So I wish he was at the table to answer that. You know.
I am not Franz Gerhard Walter, but I can explain you some aspects of this. But it's going somewhere else than the discussion with Fiete. So I think maybe we should first stick to his work, and then finish maybe with a private conversation about this. I would say conservation issues actually. And that's also interesting point in the exhibition is that the work has its own life. For example, if you come now with the wind or autumn, you can have leaves entering the space of Fiete and the other artists. And it gives another perception of the piece, or even more romantic or melancholic, as you said.
Yeah, what,
so the context for us is really something crucial. I mean, because it's not only that we show works in a white cube here at the Biennale. We deal with incredible sites like the Arsenale, and every brick, every column has to be taken into consideration for the art. For us, it has been a process with each artist to explore the way each work will interact with the space. And it's very interesting to see that, for example, for Fiete, it didn't say, oh, no, I don't want this space, I want to have a white cube. And intuitively, I knew that it could fit to him, but that's something that you have to guess with an artist is what is the best way a work can grow like a flower somehow. And I was very happy that Fiete is really an artist that can deal with different contexts and not only the gallery or the museum. While some artists, they cannot go out of it, you know. And maybe it's because his work is about his interaction with his own environment in a very large sense. He's not a gallery artist.
Yeah. No, we were really erleichtert, I don't know the word, relieved that in the end that it was possible to put it into the floor, because
it seems natural, but it was a work.
Yeah, it seems natural, but then we heard that, of course, here at the Biennial, you cannot touch anything, not even the old floor. And then, it was very hard to find ways to install it in a way that is similar to this, but it would have been some kind of, thinking around the corner and finding ways that look like as if and things like this. And now it's very basic, like it was meant to be also on the staircase, because the work wasn't really produced to be just on stairs, but it was a good place to display them, to show them. But here it's quite similar. It's a found floor, like not touched, besides from the two parts that are released into the material.
Did you ever show it in a white cube?
No.
I don't think so,
No.
Actually, for me, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work,
I mean, I sometimes imagine them on a stone floor or stone case to be inserted inside, but
cement.
Cement. It never happened so far, but it would be nice. I mean, it mustn't be wood. It's just it's an easy way to install it. The other way would be more hard, but also very, very strong. I mean, it's always a contrast of materialities and.
But this piece is a good example of one of your work that can last very long.
Yeah.
Contrary to a lot of your experiments.
It's true. It's
there are
true,
some
but
editions.
yeah, it's very few. But for me, the idea of of an edition is already inside the work, because copper refers also to the to printing plates, because it's used for printing plates, and it's material for contact. Actually, that's why I chose it, because of the aspect of contact. It's very good for electricity, for temperature, and it's printing the material for printing plates. So the idea of being reproduced is already inside the work. You have the left and the right footprint, so you can think it of like, yeah, print them in some way forever, for eternity. Like just left and right, you can already have these the sound of the
actually,
steps
it's an edition
inside.
of 3, no?
Of 4.
4, 3
Yeah.
plus an AP.
I think 4 plus.
4 plus an AP.
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe for a larger public, it's interesting to understand that sculpture can be, even if it's not about imprint, produced by some artists in editions, like photographs. But in general, in smaller editions, with a special edition that is called an AP, an artist proof, that the artist keeps from himself and then allows him to show the piece, for example, even if it's sold to a museum. That's something that, yeah, Rodin, you know. It's not a new practice for sculpture, and it makes sense when it's about molding, but it also exists without any molding process. I think we're at the end of our conversation, and
So
we
thank
want
you very much.
to thank you very much for all your very interesting questions, Fiete. Thank you.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Christine.
Thank you.